I'm Ethan, 34, and last Saturday I was genuinely excited about my brother Jason's 40th birthday dinner. I spent 3 weeks finding the perfect gift, a vintage watch he'd always admired. As I walked into that upscale restaurant, gift box carefully wrapped, I was smiling, hopeful this would be the night we'd reconnect. I had no idea that within minutes, I'd experience one of the most humiliating moments of my adult life. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you, and let's dive into what happened next. Growing up, Jason was always 5 years ahead of me in everything. At 5, I watched my 10-year-old brother ride a bike without training wheels and desperately wanted to be just like him. When he made varsity baseball at 15, I was the proud 10-year-old who collected his discarded practice balls. I genuinely looked up to him. He was my hero, my guide to understanding the world. Our parents, Margaret and George, never tried to hide their favoritism. "Why can't you be more like Jason?" became the unofficial family motto whenever I brought home a B+ instead of an A, or chose art club over sports. Mom would display Jason's trophies prominently in the living room while my art contest certificates ended up in a drawer somewhere. Dad would clear his schedule for Jason's games, but always seemed to have important meetings during my art showcases. "Jason's going places," Dad would announce proudly at family gatherings. "He's got the Walker ambition." The unspoken implication hung in the air. I apparently didn't. As we grew older, our paths diverged dramatically. Jason followed the blueprint our parents laid out: prestigious business school, corporate finance job, marriage to Michelle, a dentist from a good family, 2 children with perfectly preppy names, Lily and Noah, and a house in the right neighborhood. He checked every box on our parents' success list. I took a different route. After struggling through business classes I hated, I finally switched to graphic design in my junior year of college. My parents acted like I'd announced I was joining the circus. "That's a hobby, not a career," Dad said dismissively. Mom just sighed. "Well, I suppose someone has to make the posters for grocery stores." The irony was that after years of building my portfolio and client base, I eventually established myself as a respected freelance designer working with several national brands. The journey wasn't easy. I ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to remember, shared apartments with questionable roommates, and maxed out credit cards during lean months. But I did it on my own, without the family connections or financial safety net Jason always had. Jason married Michelle 8 years ago. From our first meeting, I sensed her sizing me up and finding me lacking. When I explained my graphic design work at their engagement dinner, she nodded with that tight smile people use when they're pretending to be interested. "How creative," she said, somehow making it sound like I'd told her I'd professional balloon animals for a living. "I suppose someone has to do those website things." Over the years, Michelle's subtle judgment evolved into something more deliberate. Invitations to their home became increasingly rare. When family birthdays or holidays rolled around, I'd often hear about gatherings after they happened. "Oh, we just had a small thing," Jason would explain when I'd call him out. It was very last minute. Yet the elaborate Facebook photos suggested otherwise. Last Christmas was particularly telling. I'd given my niece Lily an art set after she'd mentioned wanting to learn to draw. Michelle intercepted the gift before Lily could open it. "We're focusing on STEM toys this year," she announced, setting my gift aside. "Too much artistic encouragement leads to impractical career choices." Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward me. Despite all this, I still cherished my relationship with my niece and nephew. Whenever I could see them, usually when dropping off birthday gifts or occasionally babysitting when Jason and Michelle were truly desperate, the kids and I connected in a way that felt genuine. Lily would show me her secret drawings, hidden from her mother's disapproving eyes. Noah would excitedly talk about dinosaurs and space, topics Michelle deemed distracting from his math preparation. Those stolen moments made the tension with their parents worth enduring. When Jason's 40th birthday approached, I wanted to give him something meaningful. During one of our rare conversations months earlier, We'd reminisced about our grandfather's vintage Omega watch, a piece Jason had always admired but which had been lost during a move after our grandfather passed away. After weeks of searching online auction sites, I found a nearly identical model from the same year. It cost nearly 2 months of my rent, but seeing his face when he opened it would be worth it. The watch represented more than just a birthday gift. It was my attempt to bridge the growing gap between us, a tangible reminder of the connection we once shared. Maybe, I thought, it would help him remember the brother he used to know before careers and marriages and social climbing came between us. I spent hours carefully cleaning the vintage timepiece, replacing the worn leather strap with a new one that matched the original style. I found a wooden box similar to the one our grandfather had kept his watch in, lined it with soft velvet, and positioned the watch perfectly inside. Each detail was a small act of hope that this gift might matter, might make a difference. The night before the dinner, I carefully wrapped the box in heavyweight paper with a subtle pattern, nothing flashy or cheap-looking. I tied it with a simple black ribbon rather than a gaudy bow. Everything about the presentation was designed to say, "This is substantial. This matters. I matter." As I placed the wrapped gift on my entry table, ready to take with me the next day, I allowed myself to feel genuine excitement. Maybe this would be the turning point. Maybe this gift would finally earn me a seat at the adult table in my own family. The invitation arrived 3 weeks before the event, a thick cream-colored card in a matching envelope, clearly selected by Michelle, who prided herself on proper etiquette. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Jason Walker's 40th birthday," it read in embossed gold lettering. The venue was Riverview Terrace, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, known for its waterfront location and prices that made my credit card whimper just thinking about them. I was genuinely surprised to be included. Recent family events had come and gone without my knowledge: my parents' anniversary dinner, my niece's dance recital, even a weekend family trip to the lake house. The invitation felt like an olive branch, a chance to re-establish my place in the family. I texted Jason immediately. "Got the invitation. Looking forward to celebrating with you. Let me know if I can help with anything." His response came hours later. "Great. Michelle's handling everything. Just show up." Not exactly warm, but still, I was invited. That had to mean something. The 2 weeks before the dinner were filled with preparation. Despite my tight budget after purchasing Jason's gift, I splurged on a new button-down shirt in a deep blue that a salesperson assured me brought out my eyes. I couldn't afford a new suit, but I had my existing one professionally cleaned and pressed. I even spent extra on a haircut at a proper salon rather than my usual budget spot, asking for something current but professional. The morning before the dinner, I spoke with my friend Caleb over coffee. Unlike most of my friends who had written off my family as toxic years ago, Caleb still patiently listened to my hopes for reconciliation. "So you think this dinner might be a turning point?" he asked, stirring his Americano. "Maybe. The invitation feels significant. Michelle doesn't do anything without calculation. And I found this incredible gift that actually means something to Jason." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "Just manage your expectations, okay? I'm not saying don't be hopeful, but remember how Christmas went. This is different," I insisted. "It's a milestone birthday, a significant event. And the gift is perfect. It's something only I would know to get him." "I hope you're right," Caleb said. "Just remember, regardless of how they act, you deserve basic respect. You're not auditioning for a role in your own family." I appreciated his concern but brushed it aside. This time would be different. I could feel it. On the evening of the dinner, I spent extra time getting ready. I shaved carefully, applied the expensive cologne I saved for special occasions, and meticulously checked my appearance from every angle. The face looking back at me in the mirror seemed both familiar and strange. Here I was, a grown man of 34, still desperately seeking approval from people who had consistently shown they were incapable of giving it. "Tonight will be different," I told my reflection, adjusting my tie for the third time. "This is a fresh start." The drive to Riverview Terrace took 20 minutes, during which I rehearsed casual conversation topics and imagined Jason's face when he opened my gift. I pictured myself easily chatting with his colleagues, impressing my parents with stories of my recent design project for a national brand, perhaps even finding common ground with Michelle. Parking at Riverview was valet only, and I felt a twinge of embarrassment as I handed over the keys to my 10-year-old Honda, watching it disappear among the Mercedes and BMWs. I reminded myself that I had chosen career fulfillment over material wealth, that my car was paid off while Jason was probably still making payments on his luxury sedan. Still, I couldn't help but feel the familiar weight of comparison as I straightened my jacket and turned toward the restaurant entrance. The hostess greeted me with the practiced warmth of high-end establishments. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Riverview Terrace. I'm here for the Walker party," I said, trying to project confidence. "Jason Walker's birthday dinner." She consulted her tablet. "Ah, yes, in our private river room. If you'll follow me." As we walked through the main dining area, I took in the understated elegance of the space: soft lighting, white tablecloths, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the waterfront where the city lights reflected on the dark water. The murmur of conversation and gentle clink of silverware created a sophisticated soundtrack that matched the setting perfectly. Through glass doors, I could see my family already gathered. My parents stood talking with another couple, friends of theirs from the country club, I guessed. Jason was laughing with a group of men in similar dark suits, while Michelle moved among the guests with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to hosting. My niece and nephew sat at a small table in the corner, dressed in miniature versions of adult formal wear, looking bored. My stomach tightened with a familiar mix of anticipation and anxiety, but I pushed the feeling down. Tonight would be different. I had been explicitly invited. I was wearing the right clothes. I had the perfect gift. I belonged here as much as anyone. With that thought firmly in mind, I took a deep breath and nodded to the hostess to open the door. The private dining room was even more impressive up close. A long table dominated the center, elegantly set for 12 with fine china, crystal glasses, and elaborate floral arrangements. Name cards and calligraphy marked each place setting. In the corner, separated from the main table, was a small round table clearly meant for children, set with colorful plastic cups and paper napkins. My parents glanced up as I entered. Mom gave a distracted wave while continuing her conversation. Dad nodded in acknowledgement but made no move to greet me. Jason was deep in conversation with a man I recognized as his boss, their heads bent together conspiratorially over something on Jason's phone. Michelle spotted me immediately. She excused herself from a conversation with two elegantly dressed women and approached with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Ethan," she said, air-kissing near my cheek. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, holding up the wrapped gift. "Where should I put this?" "Oh, the gifts are over there." She gestured to a side table already piled with packages. I carefully placed mine among them, positioning it where Jason would be sure to notice the distinctive wrapping. As I turned back, Michelle placed a hand on my arm and steered me away from the main table where guests were beginning to find their seats. "We've got quite a full house tonight," she said, guiding me toward the corner of the room. "All of Jason's partners from the firm came, plus Mom and Dad's friends the Hendersons, and of course Daniel and Rebecca are here, you remember, from our wedding?" I didn't remember them at all but nodded anyway. "So we've had to be creative with seating," she continued, coming to a stop beside the small table where Lily and Noah sat looking bored. "You'll be sitting here with the kids." I looked at the children's table, then back at Michelle, waiting for the punchline. Surely this was some kind of joke. "At the kids' table?" I asked when it became clear she was serious. Michelle's smile tightened. "Only important guests sit with the adults," she said, her voice light but her eyes cold. "Jason's colleagues need to be at the main table, of course. And the Hendersons are potential investors in George's new venture. You understand." I looked around the room, trying to keep my expression neutral. My parents were now seated at the main table, engaged in animated conversation with an older couple. Jason was taking his seat at the head of the table, surrounded by men in expensive suits. There appeared to be exactly 12 place settings, no room for a 13th. This hadn't been a last-minute decision. This had been planned. "I'm Jason's brother," I said quietly, conscious of nearby guests who might overhear. "Don't you think that makes me an important guest too?" Michelle's laugh was like glass breaking. "Oh, Ethan. Always so sensitive. It's just eating. The kids will love having their uncle to entertain them." She patted my arm condescendingly. "That's what you're good at, right? All those creative things you do." Before I could respond, she turned and glided back to the main table, leaning down to whisper something to Jason that made him glance in my direction before quickly looking away. I stood frozen for a moment, feeling the eyes of several guests on me. Taking a deep breath, I moved toward the kids' table, determined not to make a scene at my brother's birthday dinner. Lily brightened when she saw me approaching. "Uncle Ethan, are you sitting with us?" The genuine pleasure in her voice was the only sincere welcome I'd received all evening. "Looks like it, kiddo," I said, trying to sound upbeat as I pulled out one of the small chairs designed for someone half my size. That's when I noticed it. The table was set for 2, not 3. There were plates, cups, and napkins for Lily and Noah, but nothing for me. Not even a plastic cup. I looked around, thinking perhaps I needed to get my own place setting from somewhere, but there was nothing. The oversight was too specific to be accidental. There was literally no place for me at this gathering, not at the adults' table, and not even at the children's table. My stomach dropped as the full weight of the situation hit me. I'd been invited not as a guest but as an afterthought, someone to keep the children occupied while the important people socialized. I wasn't even worth a paper plate. I must have been standing there looking lost because Jason finally broke away from his conversation and approached. "Hey," he said, glancing at the kids' table and then back at me. "What's up?" "There's no place for me," I said quietly, gesturing to the table. "Not even here." Jason looked at the children's table, seeming to notice the missing place setting for the first time. For a brief moment, something like discomfort crossed his face. Then he shrugged. "Guess you're not that important," he said with a half-laugh that might have been meant to sound joking but fell painfully flat. I could smell alcohol on his breath. He'd clearly started celebrating before I arrived. I stared at my brother, this person I'd looked up to my entire life, as he stood there in his expensive suit in this expensive restaurant, dismissing my presence as unimportant. In his eyes I saw a brief flash of something, regret, perhaps, or embarrassment, before it was replaced by the glazed indifference I'd become accustomed to over the years. Behind him, Michelle was watching our interaction while pretending to listen to another conversation. I caught the slight upturn of her lips, the satisfaction in her eyes. This hadn't been a mistake or oversight. This had been deliberate. In that moment, every slight, every forgotten invitation, every dismissive comment came rushing back. The time my parents forgot to call on my birthday because they were at Jason's son's soccer game. The family photos taken while I was in the bathroom during holiday gatherings, as if to ensure I wouldn't be included. The way Michelle always managed to schedule important family events when I had unmovable work commitments, then expressed such disappointment that I couldn't attend. It had never been about my career choice or my lifestyle, or any of the other excuses they'd given over the years. It had always been this: I simply didn't matter enough to them to be treated with basic dignity. As the realization washed over me, I felt a strange calm replace the hurt and confusion. For years, I'd been trying to earn a place at a table that had never had a chair for me. I'd been auditioning for a role in a family that had already decided the cast, and I hadn't made the cut. I looked at Jason, still standing there awkwardly, clearly wanting to return to his important guests. I looked at my parents, who hadn't even bothered to check if I had a place to sit. I looked at Michelle, barely concealing her satisfaction at my humiliation. And I made a decision that would change everything. Standing beside that children's table, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger or hurt, though both were certainly present. It was clarity. For years, I'd accepted scraps of attention and respect from my family, always hoping that eventually I'd earn enough to be treated as an equal. I'd made excuses for their behavior, blamed myself, tried harder. And here I was, a 34-year-old man without even a paper plate at my brother's birthday dinner. My mind raced through similar moments throughout my life, being seated at the far end of the table at holiday meals, away from the main conversation. Having my career achievements dismissed while Jason's most minor work accomplishments were celebrated. Being introduced to friends of the family as our other son, rather than by name. The pattern was undeniable and had been consistent for as long as I could remember. What made this moment different was that it was so public, so calculated, and so unnecessary. They could have set another place at the main table. They could have at least given me a plate at the kids' table. The deliberate nature of the exclusion made it impossible to ignore or explain away. I had exactly 3 options. I could sit with the children without a plate and endure the humiliation. I could make a scene and demand accommodation, or I could simply leave. The first option would reinforce that this treatment was acceptable. The second would cast me as the villain who ruined Jason's birthday. The third would be a statement that for the first time in my life, I valued myself enough not to accept being treated this way. My heart pounded in my chest. My face felt hot. My mouth went dry. But my mind was suddenly, surprisingly clear. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped back from the children's table. The room didn't immediately fall silent like in a movie. Conversations continued, glasses clinked, people laughed. But gradually, as I walked deliberately toward the gift table, a hush spread across the room. By the time I picked up my carefully wrapped package, the only sounds were the soft background music and the muffled noise of the main restaurant beyond the private room's doors. "Ethan?" My mother's voice, puzzled rather than concerned. I turned to face the room, gift in hand. All eyes were on me now, my parents, Jason's colleagues, the family friends, and finally Jason himself, looking confused and irritated at the interruption to his celebration. "Then I'm leaving," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. Jason's expression shifted from irritation to alarm. "Wait." Too late, he seemed to realize the significance of what was happening. He stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his chair. "Don't be so dramatic," Michelle said with an exaggerated eye roll. She leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered something that made her companion cover a smile. "Son, don't make a scene," my father said in the stern voice that had intimidated me my entire life. "It's your brother's birthday." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "And I came to celebrate with him. I spent weeks finding the perfect gift. I got dressed up. I showed up on time. And there's literally no place for me here. Not even a plastic cup. We can get you a plate," my mother said, finally seeming to grasp the situation. "It's not a big deal." "That's the thing, Mom. It is a big deal. It's just the latest in a lifetime of moments where I've been treated as an afterthought in this family." Jason had made his way around the table toward me, his expression a mix of annoyance and embarrassment. "Come on, man. You're overreacting. We can pull up another chair. Now you can pull up another chair." After I pointed it out. After I was ready to leave. "That's not the same as wanting me here in the first place." "Of course we want you here," my father interjected, though he remained seated. "Stop making this about you. It's Jason's night." "It always is," I said quietly. Michelle had also risen and came to stand beside Jason, placing a proprietary hand on his arm. "I think Ethan's had a bad day and isn't in a celebratory mood," she said to the room at large. "Perhaps it is best if he goes home and we continue our evening." Something about her smug certainty that I would be dismissed and forgotten while they carried on with their perfect evening sparked a final surge of resolve. I didn't have a bad day until I arrived here and discovered that my own family couldn't be bothered to set a place for me, I said, looking directly at Michelle. "But you're right about one thing, I'm not in a celebratory mood anymore. I came here with genuine goodwill and excitement to celebrate my brother. I'm leaving with the understanding that the feeling isn't mutual. I turned to Jason. I hope you have a happy birthday. I hope your colleagues and parents, friends, and all the other important guests make it special for you. I moved toward the door, gift still in hand. Ethan, wait. Jason called, finally pushing past Michelle to follow me. You're making too big a deal out of this. It was just a mix-up with the seating. I stopped and turned back one last time. Was it? Or was it exactly what Michelle said, a deliberate choice because I'm not important enough to sit with the adults? Because I'm not important enough to even have a plate at the kids' table? Jason's eyes flickered to Michelle, then back to me. In that moment of hesitation, I had my answer. That's what I thought. I said. Enjoy your evening. As I walked out of the private dining room, through the main restaurant, and into the cool evening air, I felt a complex mix of emotions: grief for the relationship I'd thought might still be salvaged, anger at the public humiliation, but underneath it all, a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself in the face of my family's dismissal. I had valued myself enough to walk away. The valet brought my car around, and as I slipped into the driver's seat, I placed Jason's gift on the passenger seat. The watch that had cost me so much, financially and emotionally, now sat wrapped and undelivered, a tangible reminder of hopes that wouldn't be fulfilled tonight. As I pulled away from the restaurant, I knew something fundamental had changed. Not just in how my family saw me, but in how I saw myself. I might not be important to them, but I was finally important to me. And maybe that was the most meaningful gift of the evening after all. The drive home from Riverview Terrace was a blur. Instead of taking the direct route back to my apartment, I found myself driving aimlessly along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the dark water beside me. My phone started buzzing almost immediately after I left the restaurant, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Eventually, I pulled into a quiet park overlooking the river. Shutting off the engine, I sat in silence, letting the events of the evening wash over me. The emotional numbness that had carried me through my exit from the restaurant began to fade, replaced by waves of feeling that crashed over me one after another: humiliation, anger, grief, and underneath it all, a surprising thread of relief. I finally looked at my phone. 5 missed calls from Jason, 3 from my mother, and a barrage of texts. Jason, what the hell, man? You can't just walk out like that. Jason, this is childish. Come back and we'll fix the seating. Jason. You're embarrassing yourself and me. Jason, fine. Stay gone then. Mom, Ethan, please come back. Don't ruin your brother's special day. Mom, we can talk about your feelings tomorrow. Not appropriate timing. Mom, your father is very disappointed. The last text made me laugh out loud, a harsh sound in the quiet car. Of course Dad was disappointed. When had he ever not been disappointed in me? The predictability of it all suddenly seemed absurd rather than painful. There was also a single text from my niece Lily, sent from what must be her new phone. Sorry you left, Uncle E. I saved you a cupcake. That one message contained more genuine care than all the others combined, and it brought tears to my eyes. As I sat there, I realized I'd been holding my breath for years, waiting for my family to finally see me, to make space for me at the table, literally and figuratively. Tonight had shown me with painful clarity that the space would never materialize unless I demanded it, and even then, it would be given grudgingly, as a concession rather than a right. After about an hour, I started the car and drove home. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller, but somehow safer. This space was entirely mine. No one could tell me I didn't belong here or that I wasn't important enough to have a seat at the table. I placed Jason's gift on my coffee table and changed out of my suit into comfortable clothes. The formal attire I'd so carefully selected now felt like a costume I'd worn for a role I'd never been meant to play. Around midnight, my phone rang again. This time it was Caleb. Hey, I answered, suddenly exhausted. Just checking in, he said. You left the dinner 3 hours ago according to your sister-in-law's passive-aggressive Facebook post. You okay? She posted about it. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I was. Something about some people making everything about themselves. Very classy. What happened? I told him everything: the kids' table, Michelle's comment, the missing plate, Jason's dismissive response, and my decision to leave. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Caleb? I'm here, he said. Just trying to find words that aren't just a string of profanities about your family. He paused. I'm proud of you for leaving. That took guts. It doesn't feel like guts. It feels like I finally hit my limit. That's what courage often looks like, Caleb said. Not some grand gesture, but simply refusing to accept what you've always accepted before. So what now? I don't know, I admitted. I can't imagine going back to normal after this. Maybe that's a good thing. Normal wasn't working for you. We talked a while longer, Caleb offering practical suggestions about setting boundaries and caring for myself in the coming days. By the time we hung up, I had a rough plan. I would take tomorrow off work, block Michelle's number, and give myself permission to decline the next family Sunday dinner without explanation or guilt. I slept surprisingly well that night, as if a weight I'd been carrying for years had been set down at last. The next day, I woke to more missed calls and texts, including a particularly nasty one from Michelle claiming I'd ruined the entire evening and shown my true colors. I deleted it without responding and spent the day doing small, kind things for myself, ordering my favorite breakfast delivery, taking a long walk in the park, and finally starting the novel I'd been meaning to read for months. In the afternoon, I sent a brief email to my parents. I'm taking some time for myself after last night's events. I won't be at Sunday dinner this week. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. Their response was predictably focused on their own feelings rather than mine. We're very hurt by your behavior. Jason's birthday was completely overshadowed by your dramatic exit. We raised you better than this. I didn't reply. Instead, I set up an email filter to send their messages to a separate folder I could check when I felt emotionally prepared. The weekend passed peacefully, the first in years where I didn't spend Sunday feeling anxious about family dinner, then feeling guilty for feeling anxious, then forcing myself to attend anyway. Instead, I met Caleb for brunch, worked on a personal design project I'd been neglecting, and watched a movie I'd been wanting to see. Simple pleasures, but they felt revolutionary. By Monday, the constant notifications from my family had slowed to a trickle. Jason had apparently given up after several unanswered calls. My parents sent one more guilt-laden email that I filed away unread. Michelle, after being blocked on my phone, had tried to reach me through social media, which I promptly adjusted my settings to prevent. As the week progressed, I found myself thinking about family dynamics I'd never questioned before. Why had I accepted being treated as less than for so many years? Why did I keep trying to earn approval that was freely given to Jason? What would a healthier relationship with my family look like, if such a thing was even possible? I started reading about family psychology and boundary setting. I journaled about patterns I'd noticed throughout my childhood and adult life. I even booked an appointment with a therapist, something I'd considered for years but never followed through on. The most surprising discovery was how much mental and emotional energy I'd been expending on trying to please my family. Without that constant drain, I felt more creative at work, more present with friends, more at peace with myself. The pain of Friday night's humiliation was still there, but alongside it grew a steadily strengthening sense that I'd done the right thing, not just for that moment, but for my life going forward. 10 days after the disastrous birthday dinner, as I was settling in for a quiet evening at home, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and few people visited without texting first. When I checked the peephole, I was startled to see Jason standing in the hallway, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. My first instinct was not to answer. I wasn't sure I was ready for this conversation. But after a moment's hesitation, I realized I might never feel fully ready. And perhaps facing this now, on my home territory rather than his, was the healthiest approach. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Jason stood in my doorway looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Gone was the confident corporate executive, replaced by someone who reminded me more of the brother I'd known in childhood, before success and status became his defining characteristics. "Can I come in?" he asked when I didn't immediately invite him inside. I hesitated, then stepped back. "You can come in, but I'm not interested in being lectured about how I ruined your birthday." He nodded and entered, glancing around my apartment with what seemed like genuine curiosity. It occurred to me that he hadn't visited in over 2 years, despite living less than 30 minutes away. "Nice place," he said, taking in the framed artwork, some of my own designs, others from local artists I admired, the comfortable if slightly worn furniture, the wall of bookshelves. "It suits you." "Thanks," I replied, not sure what else to say. "Do you want something to drink? Water, coffee, beer?" "Water's fine." The mundane exchange gave us both a moment to gather our thoughts. I fetched 2 glasses of water and gestured toward the living room seating area. Jason took the armchair while I sat on the couch, the coffee table between us. I noticed his eyes land on the still-wrapped birthday gift sitting there. "Before you say anything," I said, setting the conversational terms right away, "I need you to understand something. I'm not going to apologize for leaving your dinner. What happened was humiliating and deliberate, and my only regret is that I didn't value myself enough to set boundaries with this family years ago." Jason looked surprised at my directness but nodded slowly. "Okay. That's fair." He took a sip of water. "Michelle said you're not returning her calls or emails." "I blocked her number," I said simply. "And her email. And her on social media." He blinked. "Isn't that a bit extreme?" "Is it more or less extreme than inviting someone to a dinner and not giving them a place to sit? Or telling them to their face they're not important enough to sit with the adults?" Jason had the grace to look uncomfortable. "About that, it wasn't supposed to happen that way." "Which part?" "The missing plate. That was an oversight. We told the restaurant 12 adults and 2 children. And yet when Michelle directed me to the kids' table, she wasn't surprised to find no place set for me. Almost like she knew." Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our childhood when he was caught in a lie. "Look, the seating was tight. We had to make some decisions. And you decided your brother was less important than your colleagues and mom and dad's friends." "It wasn't my decision," Jason snapped, then immediately looked contrite. "I mean, Michelle handled all the arrangements. I just showed up." "That's convenient," I said, keeping my voice level. "But even if I believe you didn't know about the seating plan beforehand, you had a choice when I showed you there was no place for me. You could have fixed it. Instead, you said, and I quote, 'Guess you're not that important.'" Jason winced. "I'd had a few drinks." "I didn't mean it." "Didn't you?" "Because it's consistent with how this family has treated me for as long as I can remember." "That's not fair. You're making this huge deal out of one bad moment." "It's not one moment," I interrupted, feeling a lifetime of suppressed truths rising to the surface. "It's a pattern. It's Mom displaying your trophies but putting my awards in a drawer. It's Dad clearing his schedule for your games but always being too busy for my art shows. It's you and Michelle forgetting to invite me to family events, then posting photos all over social media. It's being seated at the far end of every holiday table, if I'm invited at all. It's Michelle criticizing my gifts to the kids and making sure I know my career isn't valuable. It's being introduced as our other son instead of by name." As I listed each example, Jason's expression shifted from defensive to uncomfortable to something approaching recognition. "And through it all," I continued, "I kept showing up. I kept trying. I kept hoping that eventually I'd earn enough points to be treated with basic dignity in my own family. Friday night finally showed me that's never going to happen." There was a long silence after I finished. Jason stared into his water glass as if it might contain a script for what to say next. "I didn't realize it felt that way to you," he finally said. "How else could it feel?" He shrugged helplessly. "I guess I never thought about it from your perspective. You always seemed fine. You never said anything. Would it have mattered if I had? The question hung between us, uncomfortable but necessary. I'd like to think so, Jason said, but his tone lacked conviction. Another silence fell. I waited, letting him sit with the discomfort rather than rushing to fill the void as I might have done in the past. Michelle puts a lot of pressure on me, he said eventually. About status, appearances, who we associate with. Her family is very concerned with how things look. And having a graphic designer brother who lives in a modest apartment doesn't fit the image? Something like that. He looked up at me. I'm not defending it. I'm just trying to explain. So you let her dictate who in your family is worthy of respect? It's not that simple. It is that simple, Jason. You're a 40-year-old man. You make choices. You've repeatedly chosen to allow your wife to treat your brother like he's embarrassing or unimportant, and you've gone along with it. Jason flinched, then something shifted in his expression, a flash of the defensive anger I'd expected from the beginning. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Everyone expects me to be perfect all the time, Mom, Dad, the partners at work, Michelle. You've always had the freedom to do whatever you want, be whoever you want. No expectations, no pressure to provide for a family or maintain a certain lifestyle. I stared at him, genuinely surprised. You think I don't have pressure? I've spent my entire life being compared to you and found lacking. I built my career from nothing, with no support system, no connections, no safety net. Every client, every project, every dollar I earn comes from my own effort. If I fail, there's no one to bail me out. At least you're doing something you love, Jason said, and for the first time, I heard genuine envy in his voice. Do you think I'm passionate about corporate tax law? I haven't enjoyed my work in years. But I can't just change careers now. I have a mortgage, private school tuition, retirement accounts to fund. Those are choices you made, I pointed out. No one forced you into that life. Didn't they? You remember how Dad was about respectable careers. How Mom talked endlessly about the right kind of life, the right kind of family. You chose to ignore their expectations. I chose to meet them. We both paid different prices. I hadn't considered this perspective before, that Jason's apparent perfect life might be its own kind of prison. It didn't excuse his behavior or Michelle's, but it added a dimension to my understanding of my brother that I'd been missing. Maybe we're both victims of the same dysfunctional family system, I suggested. But the difference is, I'm not perpetuating it. I'm not treating anyone else the way I've been treated. Jason was quiet for a long moment. That's fair, he finally said. And you're right, I should have said something Friday night. I should have fixed the seating situation immediately. I shouldn't have made that comment about you not being important. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the broader pattern, but it was something, perhaps all he was capable of recognizing right now. I'm sorry, Ethan, he continued. Genuinely. I was wrong and I hurt you. And it's not the first time. The simple apology, offered without qualifications or deflections, caught me off guard. It was perhaps the first time Jason had ever apologized to me for anything. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. So where do we go from here? He asked. Are you done with the family completely? I'd been asking myself the same question for days. I don't know yet. I need time and space to figure that out. What I do know is that I won't go back to the way things were. I won't keep showing up to be disrespected and dismissed. That's understandable. He hesitated. What about us? You and me? I considered the question carefully. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that wanted a relationship with my brother, not the superficial connection we'd had in recent years, but something genuine. I'm open to trying, I said cautiously. But things would need to change. Real change, not just temporary behavior modification until everything slides back to the old patterns. What would that look like? For starters, one-on-one time. No Michelle. No parents. Just us reconnecting as brothers, if that's even possible anymore. Jason nodded. I'd like that. Maybe lunch next week? Maybe, I agreed, not quite ready to commit. And I need you to understand that my relationship with Michelle is probably not salvageable. I'm not going to subject myself to her treatment anymore. She's my wife, Jason said, a note of his earlier defensiveness returning. I'm not asking you to choose between us. I'm saying I choose not to be around someone who deliberately humiliates me. You can have relationships with both of us. They just won't be happening in the same room. He seemed to struggle with this but eventually nodded. I'll need to talk to her about all this. That's your choice. Just don't expect me to be available for her version of an apology if it ever comes. Some bridges stay burned. We talked a while longer, setting tentative plans for lunch the following week at a neutral location. As Jason prepared to leave, his eyes fell once more on the wrapped gift. Is that your birthday present? I confirmed. I spent weeks finding it. I picked up the package and handed it to him, not quite ready to watch him open it but no longer needing to withhold it either. Thank you, he said, holding it carefully. Can I open it now? I nodded, and he carefully removed the wrapping paper, then opened the wooden box inside. His sharp intake of breath told me the gift had hit its mark. This is like Grandpa's watch, he said, lifting the vintage timepiece from its velvet lining. The one that got lost in the move after he died. Same model, same year. I confirmed. I remembered how much you admired it. Jason stared at the watch, then at me, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. You remembered that conversation? That was over a year ago. Of course I remembered. You're my brother. He carefully returned the watch to its box, his movements deliberate, as if he needed the moment to compose himself. I don't deserve this. Probably not. I agreed with a small smile. But that's the thing about gifts. They're not about deserving. As I closed the door behind Jason after he left, I felt neither triumph nor resolution, just the quiet certainty that something important had changed, and that whatever happened next would be on different terms than before. Whether those terms would lead to healing or further separation remained to be seen, but for the first time, I felt I was participating in shaping that outcome rather than merely accepting whatever scraps of family connection were thrown my way. The gift I'd chosen with such care and hope now rested in Jason's hands. Whether he would recognize its value, not just the monetary cost but the thought and love behind it, was up to him. But I had given it freely, without expectation, and in doing so, had perhaps given myself an even more valuable gift, the beginning of freedom from seeking approval I might never receive. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have predicted that night I walked out of Jason's birthday dinner. The most visible change was my new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom with large windows that flooded the living area with natural light, perfect for the small art studio I'd set up in the corner. After years of making do with whatever space I could find for my creative work, having a dedicated area with proper lighting and storage felt like a luxury I'd never imagined for myself. My career had shifted too. The week after the birthday dinner incident, I'd declined a project that undervalued my work, something I'd never felt confident enough to do before. That decision led to an unexpected referral to a client who not only paid my full rate without negotiation but had since become a steady source of work. Taking that stand for my professional worth seemed to have opened a door to clients who genuinely valued what I offered. Perhaps the most significant change was in my personal life. I'd started dating Rachel, a children's book illustrator I met at a local art fair. Our creative fields complemented each other, and for the first time, I was in a relationship with someone who understood and respected my work. Unlike previous relationships where I'd often diminished my career to avoid the kind of judgment I received from my family, with Rachel I could freely share both successes and struggles. My relationship with my family had evolved in ways both expected and surprising. True to my word, I maintained a complete communication blackout with Michelle. She had sent one carefully worded non-apology via Jason. "I'm sorry if you felt unwelcome," which I acknowledged but did not respond to. My parents had initially been furious about my dramatic behavior, but gradually adjusted their approach when they realized I was serious about maintaining boundaries. The most meaningful change had been with Jason. We'd kept our lunch date the week after his visit to my apartment, meeting at a casual cafe halfway between our workplaces. The conversation had been awkward at first, both of us unsure how to relate without the old patterns to fall back on. But as we talked about neutral topics, a documentary he'd watched, a design project I was working on, something shifted. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, we were speaking as two people getting to know each other, rather than performing the prescribed roles of successful older brother and creative younger brother. That lunch led to another, and another, until we'd established a monthly tradition of meeting without spouses, parents, or other family members present. During these meetings, we began to rebuild something I'd thought was permanently lost, a genuine connection based on who we actually were rather than who our family expected us to be. My relationship with my niece and nephew had also strengthened. After discussing it with Jason, I now occasionally picked them up from school and spent the afternoon with them before returning them to their home, carefully timed for when Michelle was at her dental practice. Lily, now 11, shared her growing interest in photography with me, while 9-year-old Noah and I bonded over his fascination with astronomy. These relationships, developing outside the shadow of family dynamics, became precious to me in a way I hadn't anticipated. As Thanksgiving approached, the first major family gathering since the birthday dinner incident, I faced a decision. Jason had called to extend the invitation personally. "It's at Mom and Dad's this year," he said. "Not at my house. Michelle will be there, of course, but she's agreed to be civil." "Civil," I repeated. "Setting a high bar there." "It's a start," Jason sighed. "Look, I'm not going to pressure you. It would mean a lot to have you there. To me, to the kids. Even to Mom and Dad, though they never admit it." After considerable thought and a long conversation with my therapist, I agreed to attend with conditions. I would arrive after the meal was already set up to avoid any seating confusion. I would bring Rachel as my support person, and I would leave immediately if anyone made disparaging comments about my career, lifestyle, or the birthday dinner incident. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, Rachel and I drove to my parents' house together, arriving deliberately 15 minutes after the scheduled start time. I was surprised to find Jason waiting for us in the driveway. "Just wanted to make sure everything was set up right," he said, giving me a meaningful look. "You've got a place at the main table, between Lily and Rachel. Name cards and everything." The gesture, simple as it was, meant more than he could know. It was an acknowledgement of what had happened 6 months ago and a concrete step to ensure it wouldn't happen again. Dinner was a strange mix of old tensions and new dynamics. Michelle was coldly polite, speaking to me only when directly addressed. My parents made visible efforts to ask about my work, though their questions revealed how little they understood or valued creative careers. The real bright spots were Lily and Noah's genuine excitement about having Uncle Ethan and Miss Rachel at Thanksgiving, and the way Rachel smoothly deflected awkward moments with charm and grace. As we drove home that evening, Rachel asked, "So, was it worth it?" I considered the question carefully. "I think so. Not because it was particularly enjoyable, but because it was on my terms. I didn't shrink myself to fit their expectations. I didn't accept disrespect. I showed up as who I really am, with someone who values that person, and let them adjust to me for once." She squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy." The strange thing is, it was easier than all those years of trying to earn their approval. There's a certain freedom in letting go of that need. In the months that followed Thanksgiving, I continued building my life around people and pursuits that genuinely nourished me. I joined a weekly art group that pushed my creative boundaries. I maintained my monthly lunches with Jason, which gradually became less awkward and more genuinely enjoyable. I established a schedule for spending time with my niece and nephew that worked around Michelle's availability. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. They seemed genuinely puzzled by my insistence on being treated with the same respect they automatically gave Jason, but they had at least stopped overtly comparing us or dismissing my career. It wasn't a warm relationship, but it was no longer actively harmful. Christmas brought another family gathering, this one less tense than Thanksgiving. My parents had made a point of displaying one of my framed design prints in their living room, a small gesture that would have meant the world to me a year ago, and which I now recognized as progress without being overly attached to its significance. The most meaningful moment came after dinner, when Jason pulled me aside and showed me his wrist. He was wearing the vintage watch I'd given him for his birthday. "I wear it every day," he said. "It reminds me of Grandpa, but also, it reminds me not to take people for granted. Especially you." In that moment, I felt something heal that I thought would remain broken forever. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to matter. As the new year began, I reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. I'd gone from someone desperately seeking a place at the family table to someone who had built his own table and carefully chosen who to invite to it. I'd transformed from constantly seeking external validation to finding worth and value within myself and my chosen relationships. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been painful conversations, setbacks, moments of doubt. There were still family events that left me emotionally drained, comments that stung, old patterns that threatened to reassert themselves. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted because I had shifted. I was no longer willing to accept scraps of respect and affection. I required the full meal, or nothing at all. In the end, the most surprising discovery was that walking away from that kid's table had led me not to isolation, but to a richer, more authentic form of connection, with Jason, with my niece and nephew, with Rachel, with friends like Caleb who had supported me through the transformation, and most importantly, with myself. The seat I'd been denied at that birthday dinner table had become, in retrospect, not a humiliation but an invitation, to create a life where I never again had to question whether I was important enough to have a place setting. And that realization was worth everything I'd gone through to reach it. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship or situation to protect your self-worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. We all face these difficult moments when we have to decide if we'll continue accepting disrespect or stand up for ourselves. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more authentic stories about family relationships and personal growth. Remember, sometimes the most important gift you can give yourself is the courage to say, enough, and walk away. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the strength to honor your worth in every relationship in your life.